This is a moment in Jewish history. Acetone, butanol, ethanol fermentation can be used to convert corn and other starches into acetone and N-butanol, similar to how yeast ferments sugars to produce ethanol for wine, beer, or fuel. Louis Pasteur experimented with it in the 1860s and later August Fernbach, but it really became useful when the chemist Chaim Weizmann invented his method of ABE fermentation back in 1915. It became known as the Weizmann Process, and Chaim Weizmann went on to hold over 100 patents for scientific inventions. But science was just one of Weizmann's passions. The other was Zionism, and he became Israel's first president after decades of dedication to the Zionist cause. I'll let him explain it in his own words.
Our people were to find a home, not a refuge, not an asylum, not a mere shelter, but a home with which their past memory and future hope were inseparably bound up. The Jewish people was to fashion its own political and social institutions in the image of its own character and tradition on a level of equality with all other nations in the human family.
Chaim Weizmann was born in the small shtetel of Motl in the Russian Empire in 1874, one of 15 siblings. At a young age, he joined the Chovevei Zion movement, which sought to repatriate the Jewish people to the land of Israel. He earned a PhD in chemistry and taught at the University of Manchester. This is when he met such people as Winston Churchill and Lord Arthur Balfour. It was here that he discovered ABE fermentation. At the time, smokeless gunpowder was made from calcium acetate, which was imported from Germany. But now World War I had begun, and Britain was at war with Germany. Discovering that the Weizmann method could be used to create smokeless gunpowder from acetone instead was of great benefit to the British war effort. Soon, England, Canada, and the United States were producing it. When Lord Balfour asked Weizmann what he would like in return for his efforts, he replied, "I only want one thing, a national home for my people." This was one of the many reasons Lord Balfour wrote his famous Balfour Declaration in 1917. England at that time took control of the land of Israel from the Ottoman Empire, which had sided with Germany and lost World War I. England promised that they would support a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Weizmann would go on to meet with many diplomats to garner support for the Zionist cause. By that time, he was president of the World Zionist Organization. He met on multiple occasions with Emir Faisal of the Hashemite family, prince of the Kingdom of Hejaz and son of the Sharif of Mecca. He later became king of Iraq. In 1919, they signed what was called the Faisal-Weizmann Agreement, in which Weizmann, representing the Jewish people and the Zionist movement, and Faisal, representing the Arab interests, agreed to abide by the Balfour Declaration and work together for mutual benefit. Here's what Weizmann later said about the agreement.
The Jews are only claiming in small measure what has been conferred upon the Arabs in abundant degree. There was a time when Arab statesmen were able to see that equity in its true proportions. That was when the eminent leader and liberator of the Arabs, the Emir Faisal, later king of Iraq, made a treaty with me, declaring that if the rest of Arab Asia were free, the Arabs would concede the Jewish right freely to settle and develop in Palestine, which would exist side by side with the Arab states. My first thought on coming to Palestine in 1918 was to see the Arab leader and to reach such an agreement with him. The condition which the Emir then stipulated, namely the independence of all Arab territories outside Palestine, has now been fulfilled. The area of Arab independence stretches from the Euphrates to the Indian Ocean. But independence is not the sole and exclusive prerogative of the Arabs. We also have a claim to it.
The work to create an independent Jewish state culminated in the United Nations vote of 1947, when the British agreed to leave within the year, and the majority of nations voted yes to a Jewish country in the land of Israel. The following are excerpts from Weizmann's speech to the UN.
We are left with but two alternatives for the future government of the Jewish national home. Either it must be independent, forming a free national unit, or it must become and remain a minority under Arab rule, subject in the last resort to the will of the Arab majority. I will not discuss whether it is a good or bad fortune to be a minority in an Arab state. I would leave the Jews of Iraq, of Yemen, of Tripoli, and the Christian Assyrians of Iraq to pronounce upon them. When the Jews face the Arab as equal members of this assembly and of the family of nations, only then will the prospect of a real partnership open out.
Finally, in 1948, the State of Israel was born, and Weizmann, for his years of dedication, was offered the role of president.
It was a proud day at Tel Aviv when that great Zionist leader, Dr. Weizmann, set foot on the shores of Israel. As president of the Provisional State Council, he came to deliver the inaugural address. The veteran leader, spared to see the triumphant conclusion of his life's work, was indeed entering the Promised Land, an auspicious beginning for the new government of Israel.
As president, Weizmann continued his diplomatic efforts, visiting countries such as the United States.
The President of Israel, Dr. Chaim Weizmann, meets America's President, Harry Truman, and gives him a Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Dr. Weizmann tells reporters the 2 major points which he discussed with President Truman.
I have tried to explain to the President that it is essential for us, for our safety, for our fight there in Palestine, that the embargo should be lifted as soon as possible. The other point, which is of equal importance, was the discussion of a loan, not a very big loan, but a medium-sized loan. For American standards, it is probably very small. But we have a tiny country, and for our tiny country, it's quite a considerable chunk of money.
The next day, Dr. Weizmann, after thanking America for its friendship, sails for France. He states regretfully that he is bypassing England, his home, because Britain has failed to recognize Israel. But he voices the Jews' desire to live in friendship with both Britain and the Arabs.
His legacy lives on in the Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot. Weizmann founded it in 1934 as the Daniel Seif Research Institute, and today it continues to be a leading educational institution.
On his 75th birthday, Dr. Chaim Weizmann dedicates a new science department of the Weizmann Institute at Rehovot. 3,000 scientists from many lands are on hand to honor Israel's scientist president. The celebration coincides with the 32nd anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, favoring a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The ribbon cutting is the first half of a twin ceremony. For in addition to the opening of a new physics building at the Institute, Mrs. Weizmann lays the cornerstone for a new biochemistry building. Ambassador MacDonald represents the United States as the world hails Dr. Chaim Weizmann, scientist and statesman.
And what became of his ABE fermentation method? Well, by the 1960s, it was replaced by petroleum chemical plants. In recent years, green energy advocates have been working on reviving some of the Weizmann method to see if it can be used to produce a more sustainable biofuel, but so far the Weizmann method really isn't used anymore. The State of Israel, however, has gone on to be in the forefront of science and high-tech innovation. His family, too, went on to make many achievements. His wife, Vera Weizmann, was a pediatrician who served as science advisor in chemistry for the British Armed Forces during World War I. She established Beit K in Nahariya, a center for wounded soldiers, and Sheba Medical Center's rehabilitation hospital. His nephew, Erez Weizmann, also served as president of Israel and had a large part in creating Israel's Air Force. He was one of Israel's earliest pilots and was commander of the Israeli Air Force. But that's a story for another time. For more information, I recommend Trial and Error, the autobiography of Chaim Weizmann, as well as The Impossible Takes Longer, the memoirs of Vera Weizmann. This has been a moment in Jewish history. Thank you to all the listeners, and Shalom.